altitude 27,000 feet above the Caribbean Sea. The gray fuselage of a Y-20 transport aircraft vibrates as humid air lashes against its metallic skin. Inside, under red cabin lights, rows of Chinese Marines from the 1st Amphibious Brigade sit in silence. Their helmets are fastened rifles between their knees, eyes fixed on the digital map projected onto the bulkhead. Captain Leeway 33 checks his wrist display coordinates, locked Port of Spain, Trinidad. Below, the turquoise expanse of the Caribbean glows under scattered clouds, oblivious to what's about to happen. The operation codename, Peace Dragon. On the radar screen inside the forward command aircraft, the convoy emerges as a dense cluster of signals: 8 Y-20s, 4 KJ-500 early warning planes, and 2 Z-9 escort helicopters launched from the Chinese amphibious assault ship Hainan LPD-31, anchored just outside Trinidad's territorial waters. Officially, the mission is a humanitarian cooperation exercise following the Trinidad-China Security Pact, signed 3 days earlier. Unofficially, it's the first forward deployment of Chinese Marines in the Western Hemisphere. At 0430 hours local time, the first wave descends through the tropical mist. The roar of jet turbines cuts through the dawn silence. Beachfront residents and chaguaramas wake to a thunderous noise, the kind no Caribbean island has heard before. The Y-20's ramp opens midair, and 30 tons of cargo armored personnel carriers, unmanned drones, and mobile radar units touch down on pre-cleared landing zones secured by Trinidadian police units, loyal to the newly signed alliance. Red flags with 5 golden stars flutter against the palm trees. Captain Lee steps onto the tarmac, the humid air instantly fogging his visor. He gives a brief signal to his men: Phase 1 secure. Begin infrastructure setup. Trucks roll out, assembling a mobile communications hub linked directly to Beijing's South Theater Command. In less than an hour, satellite dishes pivot toward the horizon, linking the Caribbean to the South China Sea through encrypted channels. The world watches in disbelief as live satellite images leak online. Thousands of uniformed PLA Marines, armored convoys bearing Mandarin markings, and radar trucks forming a defensive perimeter around the Port of Spain naval base. Meanwhile, 500 miles west in Caracas, the news hits the Bolivarian High Command like an electric shock. Inside the underground command center beneath Fort Tiuna, Admiral Rodrigo Suarez slams his fist onto the map table. "They didn't even warn us," he growls. "Foreign troops, right off our northern coast." Defense Minister General Maria Andrade stares at the map. Chinese deployment zones overlap the Venezuelan Navy's northern patrol routes. "They call it peace," she mutters, but it smells like provocation. Within minutes, orders are transmitted. Mobilize the Bolivar Fleet, full alert. At Puerto Cabello, Venezuela's largest naval base, alarms echo across the docks. The heavy cruiser ARV Libertador activates its radar systems. Sailors rush aboard with crates of ammunition, surface-to-air missiles, and radar-guided torpedoes. By dawn, 6 destroyers, 8 frigates, and a swarm of fast attack boats, painted with the Venezuelan tricolor, begin moving north toward the Caribbean line. Overhead, Su-30 Mk2 fighter jets roar into the humid skies, forming a spearhead escort for the fleet below. In the streets of Caracas, television anchors attempt to explain the inexplicable Chinese Marines on Caribbean soil. The government frames it as a sovereign agreement between friendly nations. Yet Venezuelan citizens flood social media with anger and fear. "They've brought Asia's wars to our doorstep," one post reads. Across Latin America, headlines explode: "The Dragon in the Caribbean." China's silent invasion, Venezuela, prepares for confrontation. By midday, reconnaissance drones from Venezuela's 3rd Air Command reach the northern horizon. Their live feeds show Chinese naval supply ships off the Trinidad coast, Type 075 amphibious assault vessels, and Type 901 fast combat support ships, forming what looks less like a humanitarian mission and more like a forward operating fleet. Admiral Suarez tightens his jaw. "We'll show them this is our ocean," he says. The order goes out. Prepare to intercept. The Caribbean, once known for calm waters and steel drums, is now buzzing with the hum of jet engines. Sonar pings and coded radio chatter. Two powers, one rising, one cornered, are now staring across a blue battlefield that's never seen such tension since the Cold War. The calm of the Caribbean breaks. 12 hours after the first Chinese Marines landed in Trinidad, the Venezuelan response is in full motion. In the operations room of ARV Sucre, F-21 Commander Ernesto Paredes adjusts his headset, listening to the crackling voice of Admiral Suarez. Maintain visual range. Do not fire unless provoked. But if they cross the 39th parallel, you are cleared for engagement. The order hangs in the air like a blade. Out on the deck, the early dawn light glints off the rows of YJ-83 anti-ship missiles mounted on Venezuela's frigates. The crews are restless. The sea air smells of fuel and nerves. From the bridge, the silhouettes of Chinese warships are faintly visible on the horizon, a formation of gray giants, their hulls bearing the unmistakable Red Star insignia. The Hainan and her sister ship Guangxi maintain slow patrols around Trinidad, flanked by drones circling like hawks. Between them, civilian shipping lanes have gone eerily empty. Tankers are rerouting south toward Guyana. Airlines suspend routes to avoid a potential conflict zone. By 0800 hours, the Venezuelan Navy has positioned 22 vessels along the maritime boundary, establishing what they call the Northern Shield Line. The flagship ARV Libertador broadcasts an open radio message in Spanish and English. Unidentified foreign forces in Caribbean jurisdiction, identify your intentions immediately or withdraw. No reply. Only static and the distant hum of Chinese radar sweeps painting the horizon. Meanwhile, in Caracas, the government's rhetoric hardens. President Nicolas Marquez addresses the nation on live television, his voice trembling with both fury and fear. Venezuela will not bow to any foreign power. The Caribbean is not a playground for imperial ambitions, not from the east, not from the west. Behind him, the Venezuelan flag waves under the studio lights while advisors exchange worried glances. Intelligence reports have just confirmed that Chinese amphibious craft are unloading Type 15 light tanks and HQ-17 missile systems in southern Trinidad, less than 600 kilometers from Venezuela's coastline. Across the ocean, in Beijing's foreign ministry, the statement triggers an immediate counter. Spokeswoman Zhao Liying reads from her podium, "The People's Liberation Army Marines are conducting joint exercises with Trinidad under a legitimate bilateral agreement. Any threat to our personnel will be regarded as an act of hostility." On social networks, the hashtags #Caribbean Dragon and #Bolivar Fleet trend globally. Analysts, pundits, and soldiers' families debate whether this is the start of a new front in the global chessboard. At 1100 hours, the Sucre detects an unknown sonar contact deep and moving fast. Submarine bearing 205, the sonar officer reports. Commander Paredes narrows his eyes. Chinese type 093B, most likely, he mutters. The Venezuelan frigates shift formation, launching sonar buoys and activating anti-submarine torpedoes, but they do not fire. The message is clear. Caracas is drawing a line, daring the Dragon to cross. In the skies above, Venezuelan Su-30s lock onto heat signatures from a formation of Chinese J-15 fighters deployed from Hainan's deck. For the first time in history, South American pilots find themselves targeting Chinese aircraft over Caribbean waters. The air controllers' voices tremble over the radio, maintain formation. No sudden movements. They blink first, not us. At 11:10, two J-15s make a low pass over Venezuelan frigates, the roar of their engines rattling every window in the command deck. A single misfire could ignite the entire region. Then it happens. A Venezuelan patrol drone operating from Isla Margarita locks onto an unidentified signal approaching from the east. Seconds later, a flash, a sonic boom and explosion. The feed cuts to static. The drone has been destroyed. On board the Libertador, Admiral Suarez clenches his teeth. Who fired? He demands. No answer. The Chinese formation remains silent. Tension spikes. Venezuela declares the loss an unprovoked act of aggression. By afternoon, the Caribbean skies turn metallic gray. Thunder mixes with the roar of jets and the hiss of missile silos preparing for launch. Civilian radio stations interrupt music broadcasts with emergency updates. All coastal residents are advised to remain indoors. The government has raised the alert to DEFCON 2. Across the sea, the Chinese fleet locks into defensive formation, radar arrays spinning like a storm of eyes. Both sides are staring into the abyss, each convinced the other will blink first. As night descends, lightning flashes over the Caribbean waters, illuminating the two fleets like ancient armies facing across a dark ocean. The hum of engines never stops. The men aboard both sides whisper to themselves not prayers, but calculations. The world's next war might not start in Europe or Asia, but right here in the tropics. Midnight Caribbean Sea. The horizon is a dark mirror broken only by the faint glimmer of radar lights aboard the Venezuelan cruiser ARV Libertador. Inside the operations room, every sound is amplified. The beeping of sonar, the whir of cooling fans, the muffled tension in each breath. Commander Paredes watches a new blip appear on the tactical screen, multiple incoming signatures from the east, closing in fast. Drones, the technician whispers. Too many. On the radar, it looks like a cloud, hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles flying low, their transponders silent. From the opposite horizon, the silhouette of the Hainan lights up like a floating city. The Chinese have launched a reconnaissance swarm, the largest ever seen in this hemisphere. The Venezuelan fleet activates its counter-drone systems. Radar-guided autocannons swivel into position, launching bursts of tracer fire into the night sky. The Caribbean explodes into chaos. Streams of fire streak upward as hundreds of drones dive and spin, lighting the clouds with streaks of red and orange. One crashes into the water, another slams into the hull of ARV Sucre, igniting the deck. A chorus of alarms fills the air, impact on starboard hull breach, fire control sector 4, but still no official word from Beijing. At 0043 hours, a transmission cuts through the static. This is Captain Li Wei of the People's Liberation Army Navy. Stand down immediately. Any further approach will be met with force. The voice is calm, almost cold. Admiral Suarez, standing on the bridge of the Libertador, grips the radio and replies, "You are trespassing in sovereign waters. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences." Silence follows, then the night answers for them. A flash on the horizon followed by the roar of an explosion. One of the Venezuelan patrol boats, ARV Falcon, vanishes in a column of flame. The fleet retaliates. Venezuelan destroyers fire a salvo of YJ-83 missiles. Ironically, the same Chinese-made missiles purchased years earlier. They streak across the sea, targeting radar emissions near Trinidad's northern shore. The counterstrike is immediate. Chinese HQ-17 systems on land intercept half of them, but one missile slips through, detonating near a landing zone. The shockwave rattles windows in Port of Spain. Civilians rush into the streets, filming with shaking hands as the sky glows blood red. In Washington, Pentagon analysts watch the satellite feed in disbelief. We've got two major powers engaging in live fire within a U.S. trade corridor, one mutters. If this spreads west, Panama's next. Across the Atlantic, NATO and Russia remain silent, unwilling to choose sides in a war that was never supposed to happen. By 03:30, the rain begins to fall, hissing against the hot metal decks of burning ships. The last remaining drones hover, capturing footage that will flood social media within hours. The Libertador half-submerged Chinese Marines rescuing wounded Venezuelan sailors from the waves in the Caribbean lit by flames. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the gunfire ceases. Both sides, exhausted and bloody, drift apart under the same storm clouds. At dawn, the Caribbean looks calm again, deceptively so. The sea hides its scars, but the world above it has changed forever. The Peace Dragon operation has awakened something ancient in the hemisphere. The return of power politics, the fear that the tropics are no longer neutral ground. Fishermen in Grenada report black smoke on the horizon. Children in Caracas draw warships instead of palm trees. And somewhere between Trinidad and Venezuela, the ghosts of that night still float, silent witnesses to the moment the Caribbean stopped being paradise.